Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
You are stunning.
Oh my gosh.
You are a stunning horse.
I did not know where that was going. I thought that was going to say something real different.
Well, I was thinking of...
Horse.
I was thinking of the majestic horses. You know, mares, but I couldn't say the word mare because I couldn't remember mare. And I was like,
stunning mare.
You think about when a mare is galloping and their like mane is like flying through the wind, and I'm like, you are a stunning mare, and I want to ride you. Oh my gosh, it's taking a turn for the worse.
Here's the thing. Let's just be real about this. We got ready and I started complimenting you and telling you how much I loved you, and suddenly you're like, hold on a second, and then you hit record and you shot back. You just
because
want
I was
credit for
already
yours.
thinking you were beautiful before you had said all the compliments that came out of you about me.
Well, I'm feeling real mushy.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I like you.
Yeah. People who are freshly joining may be like, and just
not
vomiting in their mouth a little bit.
No
Well,
way.
here's the thing. Like sometimes, love doesn't feel real.
That's such a dark statement.
It is. People have emotions about love, and sometimes they don't think it's really real. And
I'm
they hear
much
something
more-
mushy, and they're like, that's not real.
See, I'm much more like a romantic, so I'm like, every time I hear that people like each other, I'm like, oh, thank God real love still exists on the planet.
Yeah, that's true. And real love is not all mushy.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why we talk about all the messy things in life, because we don't want to give you the perception that perfect love is always happy.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
But I'm mushy today, and we're going to talk about the messy things. So I think that's the best. That way people can feel like solid ground. They're like, oh, they like each other.
Yeah,
It's
they do
okay.
like each other as they're about to talk about their horrible marriage that they've had in the past.
That's not true.
Speaking of our horrible marriage in the past, a lot of that's been dictated by our relationship with our parents, specifically our mothers.
Yeah.
And we want to dive into conversations about moms.
Yeah, we did a father series we released it this year,
Yeah.
and people love it. It's an e-course and a workbook, and basically it's like doing a year of counseling in like one place.
JustinandAbby.com, if you're wondering. That's ABI, JustinandAbby.com/shop.
Okay, I think they got it. But when we did that, we got so much feedback. It changed people's lives and transformed and healed so much for people. But so many people were like, we need a mother series.
Yeah,
and
give
so
us the mother series.
We've begun working on that, and we have some of the things that we'll release on the podcast, and then a bunch of things that will just be a part of the e-course that we're creating. But so this is one of those episodes.
Yeah, jumping into mom. So
wait, before we do that,
yeah, go
if
ahead.
you know that you're going to need the mother series when it comes out, feel free to email us at
LFA@stumballconsulting.com.
That
That's
stands-
LFA, standing for Living Fully Alive. And you can just tell us, put on your mailing list for all of that upcoming updates and stuff.
Woo! Okay.
So, but jumping into the mother series here.
Yes. So, okay, in counseling, I have heard this several times where they're like, you subconsciously treat your partner like your parents. And here's the honest truth. When people say that, I'm like, BS. That is dumb. Like, I don't ever think of my mom when we are fighting.
No.
I don't ever think of my mom when we are having problems or when you're triggered. Or I don't think about my dad. And here's the other thing is that most people think you only would respond to your opposite sex parent.
Yeah.
So like, it would make sense if you have triggers with your mom that come out at me, but it wouldn't make sense for me to have triggers with my mom that come out at you. But
because of the gender roles.
Right.
Right.
But to be honest, it's all effing true. It's all true. We are one big mush pot of triggers from our parents, and they show up in our most important relationships.
And explode right in our faces.
Yep.
And we want to talk about how our moms have specifically affected our marriage. Now, moms can affect marriages in so many different ways, but if you can kind of begin to see how our moms have affected our marriage, the way we're relating to one another, then what it can do is actually send you on a journey of going, oh, I can kind of piece together my life and ask pertinent questions in my world of how I'm relating to my spouse. Yep. And does this actually relate to my mom?
Or my girlfriend, boyfriend, or
sure.
Like my closest best friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you want to start?
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to literally say, so Justin, do you want to start?
So you're throwing me in the deep end of the pool.
Yes.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to begin with for me specifically was going into marriage and what my belief system was around that. Because as we enter into relationships with the opposite sex or enter into, deeper relationships, there's beliefs that we find to be true about certain things. And I had very specific beliefs around marriage. And every time we do marriage consulting with people and we sit them down and start having conversations, we ask them, I personally do, I think you do as well, but I ask them, what do you believe to be true about marriage? And they'll give me their logical answer.
It's great. We love
marriage
it.
Marriage is awesome.
So
and I want to get married. And marriage is so helpful for people, blah, blah, blah. And that again is their logic, like what they want to believe to be true about marriage. Usually the best belief systems come out initially until we get to the deeper ones. I'm like, no, let me just ask this question. And I want you to just sit and let the thing that comes out of your belly come up. Because we're not talking about the thoughts from upstairs. We're talking about the gut feeling.
The subconscious beliefs that are actually driving your life.
Mm-hmm. And so...
most of the time, those beliefs are more like, it's going to trap you. It'll ruin your life. They'll leave you. You're going to be broken over and over again. You're going to be criticized for every little thing you do. Like, those are often the beliefs trapped in there.
Totally. So an explosion of mess. Well, when I was originally approaching our relationship in the early stages and moving towards the idea of marriage, and some of this dialogue was coming up for me, I started, I had that tug of war and I was aware of it. I had enough self-awareness to go, I really want to be married, but I hate marriage and I'm terrified of it. Why?
Yep.
What is this? And one of the things that came up is marriage is where men go to die. That was literally a belief. And I'm like, okay, where men go to die. Why? Why do men go there to die? Because women will destroy you. They want to suck the life force all out of you. And you are powerless to them. And obviously that said something about my father.
Yeah.
And the way he related to my mom, and something about how my mom related to my dad.
Yeah.
And it spoke of domination and powerlessness. Powerlessness in my dad's world and domination that I perceived in my mother's world.
Our parents really affect us in two different ways inside of romantic relationships.
Yeah.
They affect us, one, in how they treated each other.
Right.
And two, in how they treated us.
Right. So
Both
we're watching
angles.
and a lot of times I'll have people come into my office and go, hey, my mom was fantastic with me. Mm-hmm. She was really nurturing and kind. And so my childhood was perfect. I don't have any problems with my mom. And then I start asking, how did your mom relate to your siblings, or how did your mom relate to your dad?
Yeah.
And really we're observing how people are relating to the world outside of them. And we're taking in all of that information and it's building the entire picture.
Yep.
Not just the individual experiences we're having. And not only that, but we're watching how our parents, our mothers relate to themselves.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that I observed with my mom where she hated herself a lot.
Yeah.
And so that was creating a lot of information. So when she would say things like she hated her body and the way that she looked, I took on that same role of hating my body. And specifically, my mom always told me, she was very deliberate about telling me, you look just fine. There's nothing wrong with your body, because she had been criticized by her father as a child about her body.
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't, my mom was verbally, physically, and emotionally abusive in a lot of aspects. But when it came to specifically my body, she spoke very good language around that because she didn't want to replicate it.
Right.
However, just watching her get so angry at her body I was immediately in a mirror having self-hatred going, I hate the way my stomach looks, the way my hair looks, the way my face looks.
Yep.
And so that's really key to understand.
Yeah. You're watching. So as little kids, we're watching our parents to learn the roadmap to life.
Yep.
We're watching our parents to learn how we should feel and think about things, how we should interact with people, how we should respond to events. And so you're growing up in an environment where you're learning, oh, the way that we treat ourselves is with self-hatred. The way that we feel about our bodies is hating them. Like and it's never a conscious thing. Well, I mean, sometimes it's a conscious thing. Sometimes kids are choose, but it's this slow subconscious belief system that begins to take over your life.
Absolutely. So because of that, we look into my personal relationship, watching my mom relate to my dad and her relate to herself. And as a side note, going back to, I'd lost this for a minute, but literally when you observe, one of my clients had said, talked about how their mom had been so good with them, but their mom dominated their dad, was aggressive and controlling and always complaining about the father.
Yeah.
And for me, that's literally something that I watched as well inside of my household, is my mom very often complaining about my dad, acting as though he was the cause of all of her problems.
Right.
And as I'm ingesting this information, I start believing, okay, well, women inside of marriage are always dissatisfied with you. They'll never enjoy you. They don't want you to be happy, because every time my dad was like, I need to go out golfing or hunting.
Yeah.
Now, granted, my dad wasn't plugged into their connection.
So as an adult, we can see like, yes, of course the mom would be frustrated.
My dad worked tons of overtime for his dad.
Was always on call.
When he did get home, he was checked out.
Was checked out, yeah.
And then he wanted to go hunt and play sports.
Yeah. So looking back, we have a lot of compassion for your mom. And I would like to say that she's dramatically transformed now.
Right. Absolutely amazing woman, and love her so much, which is why we can talk so openly about this very easily, especially because she doesn't carry shame over it, and she likes to share about it. But so
she's like, I'll give hope. There's hope for anybody.
Yep. That's totally real. So what I did here as a young person is I heard her say, you always go out and want to go play and do things, and you don't want to spend any time with me. And she probably didn't, the more aggressive she got. But so I have this idea that coming into marriage, Abby's going to suck the life out of me.
Yeah.
All she wants is all of my time,
yep,
all of my energy. And if I'm not giving 100% focused attention on her,
yep,
she's going to become dissatisfied and angry and distant and frustrated and aggressive and passive aggressive.
Well, and this is the interesting thing. I think this is a great example is, so in your childhood, you observed something. And the truth is, I would have been dissatisfied in that marriage. Like, right. It's not because your mom is a never happy. There was actually some really big pain in that marriage. And so but as a kid, you can't formulate, oh, dad isn't available and this is what's happening. So like,
we don't have the capacity to calculate all the information.
Yeah. And we don't, or understand it all. Our brains aren't fully formed as children.
Absolutely not.
Which is a real detriment to all of us.
Right.
And so here you are, realizing women are never happy, but then you get into a marriage where that is not actually the scenario. I'm not a never happy person.
Yep.
But you feel the pressure to, if I ever have fun, if I ever don't do this, if I ever, like, the rules end up becoming magnified up from our childhood often.
And I remember when we first got into marriage, I would feel, well, let's back up. Just a quick, brief note. In our first year of marriage, we were around each other almost 24/7.
Yeah.
Because we took off on a road trip around America.
We were
for
always
6 months
together.
So we were always together.
Yep.
And we got back and we were pretty much around each other the entire time for another 6 months.
Yeah.
In Los Angeles. So, but whenever I would depart from my time with you, so maybe I'd go, maybe on the road, we'd visit friends and stuff, and I would go out with a friend and leave you somewhere, and I would have anxiety the entire time I was gone.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And I was thinking, she's so unhappy with me. She's going to get frustrated when I get back. And I'm immediately, when I'm coming back,
you're on guard.
I'm on guard and also engaging in a way of trying to
make up for it.
Make up for any deficit. Hey, how are you? Let me give a lot of focused attention really quick to take care of you.
Which is exhausting because basically you're like, like, I can't have a life. I can't be okay. And she's not okay. Now, when that was happening, were you aware like this is a mom issue?
Absolutely not. No idea whatsoever. I was just like, what I had done is I had branded Abby mom.
Yep.
I didn't know, but mom was written over Abby's forehead. And from the functioning of how mom did or didn't nurture and what mom did or didn't expect inside of the relationship. And also, I had this idea of who Abby should or shouldn't be. So when Abby wasn't being mom in certain aspects, especially, well, we'll take a simple example.
Okay.
Abby did not and could not cook worth anything. She had no aspirations to make a meal.
None.
Whatsoever.
I didn't even know that was something that I should do because you cooked the whole time we dated.
And the idea of cleaning up after herself was just so foreign to her. It was like alien.
Yeah.
So my mom, what she did have the capacity to do was
one of the ways she loves you guys
acts of
really well.
service and gifts.
Yep.
Right.
Every meal, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, fully made, not just even like a little bit made, like side dishes and main dishes and desserts. And
she really went out of her way to try and like communicate love through that aspect.
And keeping the house clean. She was great at that.
And so I'm really confused because all I can think is what an a-hole Abby is who doesn't care and doesn't love me because she doesn't pick up after herself ever.
Yep.
And that was true in the early days. You're completely different now.
Mostly different.
Yes, 95% different. But and you wouldn't cook any food. So I'm busy trying to make food for you because I'm trying to express love towards you. And I'm like becoming embittered real fast.
Totally.
This person doesn't show up to the marriage whatsoever like mom did over here. But also this person is my mom and I hate her so much.
Totally.
And so
I would say this is the dichotomy that everybody has, is there's things that you expect because of your parents, good and bad. Because I also remember in one of our first fights, you flinched because you expected that I was going to hit you when I got upset. So
I confronted you.
Yeah. You had bad expectations, then you had good expectations. The way your mom loved you is the roadmap you had to what love looks like. And here I am, and I don't have that roadmap. I don't know that that's the roadmap. I don't understand that is what's happening. And so you have the good and the bad, the expectations, and then also the fears of me being your mom.
Absolutely. So speaking of roadmap, really quick, some of you, even as we're talking, may start thinking about, oh yeah, this is kind of the experience I'm exchanging with my spouse or my significant other, whatever that happens to be. Right now, you should start the journey of taking note of your roadmap. A big homework point out of this is, what is my relational roadmap when it comes to intimacy inside of my exchange with this other person?
And I would start, since we're talking about moms, just start with your mom.
Yeah.
What did she teach me about relationships? What did she teach me about her relationship with herself, her relationship with her partner, and her relationship with me?
Yeah. And so one of the things, it wasn't just about my partner, but it was a generalization about genders, right?
Totally.
And that's totally like the gender roles and stuff that we all play. Like, you're experiencing a gender role. And for me, I was like, oh, women are horrible. Women are horrible people.
You had a lot of pain.
You can't understand them. You can't make them happy. It wasn't just my wife but it was women in general. There was a generalization about women that took place.
And I don't know that you would have ever said that consciously, because consciously you were the biggest champion of women.
Oh, always.
And this is another dichotomy that we can have inside of ourselves, like the tension.
Yes.
I have always seen you were always so kind and protective and empowering and cheering women on and wanting wholeness for them.
Yep.
And this kind of comes from your relationship with your mom, because on some levels she was your best friend.
Yep.
And you felt sad for the ways she was hurt by your dad and
wanted
in
to
life.
protect her.
And you wanted to protect her. And so there's this one side of you that like really wants to empower women. And I have seen this so often, and you get in sessions with people and you're like, you hate women. And they're like, no, I don't. But we're really saying like, there's a part of you that hates femininity. And you had that. There was a part of you that loved it, wanted to protect it, cared for it, couldn't have lived without it. And then there was this other part of you that was like, you destroy all life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. One of the other things is, and I don't know if I already said this in my verbal process here, but it was this idea that I believe that I was a cause of all her problems and I was a solution to all of her problems.
Which she just talked about in this last podcast. That is one of my favorite parts where she actually can own, and I think she didn't go to counseling. So I was like, how did she figure, like she is a smart woman that she came up with this, but she was able to literally say, I wanted you to fill the husband role and then I punished you when you couldn't. Which
absolutely.
is unbelievable self-awareness for someone to be able to say. And so she didn't know that back then.
Right.
But looking back, she could
does. And in our, you and I's relationship, I have literally felt like I'm the cause of all your problems. If you're having a bad day and you bark at me, or shut down towards me, I have to be the cause of this problem.
Right.
I must have done something wrong.
And so then
I must not be loving her enough, connecting with her enough. And so then I think I have to be the solution.
Yeah. And that often led to you getting angry with me because you couldn't make, like, let's say I'm unhappy with my body, like being sick.
Yeah.
Well, you can't fix that. And if you believe that you're not good unless I'm okay, then you're going to have to control that I get over it.
Yep. And so the thing is I could do 10,000 acts of kindness in a day and none of them are making you smile. None of them are making you more connective towards me or happy towards me.
Right.
Now I'm angry.
Yeah.
Especially if you turn to me.
I did all this for you. Why don't you care?
Especially if you turn to me and get frustrated over one simple thing.
Right.
Why didn't you do this, Justin? And I'm like, oh my God, 10,000 acts of love. And why isn't this enough?
Totally. And it would be like an interesting, that feels like a very true, when you're talking, I'm instantly flashing back to our first year of marriage because
trauma session.
That is so true. And it could be like, I could be like, hey, I feel bummed that when I tried to hold your hand, you didn't want to hold it. And you'd be like, all day, I cooked, I cleaned, I took care of this. And I was like, I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to have a voice
all
because
I heard
you
was
did
my
good
failings.
things.
And men, especially with women, can feel that, or I've heard that within the context of this generation. I don't know what that is historically, but I think it's because they observed something. They observed the mothers in the household being dissatisfied with fathers because men at large in the last couple generations have been out of the house working jobs, and then they come back. The wife
and not as emotionally connected.
And not as emotionally connected. And the dad has been working his ass off for his entire family, and that's the context of I'm doing everything I can to love my family. He walks to the door, and the wife says, "Where are you? I'm frustrated. You're never around." And so, and the dad's like, "All I've done is work for you," and that is actually a conversation had in large by a lot of families.
Yeah. Totally. So it was a real complicated scenario because my mother triggers were involved the entire time. I'm not actually going to talk about that yet.
Yeah.
But so, and this is what happens. We'll just remind you, in relationships, there's 3 stages. There's the fantasy stage where everything's magical and you love that person and everything's awesome. And then there's the fight to get your needs met stage. And that can last a decade or 5, depending. Like some people never get out of that stage. So they either break up, get divorced, or they just stay in that stage forever at war with each other. But the idea is, which one of us is going to get our needs met? And so you're over there trying to get your needs met of me being happy. And in a lot of ways, this is what we do. We find, I was talking to my counselor about this the other day because
how I'm awesome.
It's so awesome. Yes.
You weren't complaining at all about me.
No,
not at all.
But so about how we actually always find, because I didn't think you were anything like my family. And then once
I didn't think you were anything like my family were.
Totally.
Either.
And
but
then
you were just like my mom.
I mean, maybe not just like.
I'm being playful. I'm totally being playful.
But then when you, like years later, you're like, oh my gosh, there are all these areas that you are like and she basically was just like, no matter who you are, you find a partner that is something like the thing you're trying to work through from your family of origin. And so like from where you're from. So you were wanting to work through this thing where you tried to make your mom happy and you thought you could please her enough that she would be happy and then you would be safe and you would be loved. And so you were living out that cycle with me over and over and over again. Like, if I can make Abby happy, then this thing that never got satisfied as a kid will finally get satisfied.
Which you actually felt like someone who was easily happied. When I married you, you were like so pretty happy, playful, content about so many things.
Yeah.
And I probably somewhere subconsciously thought this will be an easy win. And then I realized you were completely broken. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So you came in and I remember our first year, there would be so many times, maybe I would ask you a question and you would bark back at me like I was accusing you something.
Absolutely thought you were always accusing me, which, however, I do feel like there's been blame inside of the relationship, direct blame at some level. But the reason I'm bringing this up specifically is that there are people who will listen to something like this and go, okay, none of my problems with my spouse are real. And
right.
I'm trying to say, yeah, actually some of those problems can be actually real inside of it, but they get magnified to about
times a million
suddenly inside of it. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're listening to us have this conversation.
Yeah. That's good.
So yeah, I was convinced that you were blaming me for everything, accusing me for anything and everything that was happening.
And I remember, and back then there was a lot of rage and hair triggers. And I say that's not a thing. Hair triggers.
Yeah.
Triggers over your hair. No, I meant like hairline.
Hair trigger.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a
gun
term
thing?
for like a gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm smarter than I thought.
You barely touch it and it goes off.
Yeah. So that was, and I remember probably our first few years, I had so much anger at your mom. Now, I didn't have it like at her face. It was more like the idea of her.
Right.
It wasn't because I wasn't like, I don't like you. It was like, I felt always in the shadow of her. That like you would react to me when I was doing nothing. There was like so many times where I was like innocently trying to love you or connect to you or ask you a question or a thought, and your reaction would come at me and I'd know like this is his mom. Like he thinks I'm doing what she did, but I'm not doing that thing at all. And I remember like over and over again trying to get you to see like, that's not me. I actually don't care about this thing, or I'm not responding this way, or I'm not. And there was actually, I would say in the first few years, no way to get you to fully, I don't know if internally you could see it and just weren't externally saying it, but there was no way to get you to see that lots of what I was doing wasn't that behavior.
And that, again, that's something that very consistently happens when people come through our office.
Yep.
Is they're just convinced this is my partner's intentions.
Yep.
And this has nothing to do with anything else.
Right.
And if they would change how they're acting, I'd be better.
Yes. And
which again,
like you're saying, like you felt that way. You're like, she's doing this. It's Abby's doing this.
Correct.
I'm reacting because of her response. I'm reacting because of what she's doing.
You could do one singular thing, and I'm determined that was an action of frustration, or that was an action of attack, or an action of blame.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you'd be like, no, I'm literally just asking you this question.
Totally.
And I'm convinced, no, that question is questioning who I am, my heart towards you.
Yeah.
You're like, no, it's not. I just want to know, do you really mean this?
Totally.
And so I can imagine that was infuriating for you.
Yeah. So we're saying this because part of living a powerful life, taking ownership in your life, is recognizing that we all have triggers. Nobody wants to recognize this. That we all have triggers, that we actually brought a ton of stuff into every relationship that we're in. And most of the ways we're acting out has more to do with what we brought in than who the person across from us is. And there are things that our partner does that affect us. Obviously, we're not saying that. But if you get rid of and deal with your triggers, then when your partner does a behavior that isn't great, you can be really calm.
Yeah.
And not be shaken, and you can respond in a really respectful way, even if you're setting a boundary.
Yeah. I think another point that kind of comes up to me as far as mothers and how they affect our relationships is this idea of nurture style or lack of it. And
yes,
we're going to probably talk further into more nurturing, mothers nurturing, and learning about that. But one of the things is as far as the way that we exchanged, my capacity to receive nurture was very minimal.
Yep.
Because of the lack of nurturing inside of my home experience, especially with a woman. So when you would try to touch me, I'd be like, I don't like touch. Like, leave me alone. Like,
I remember being in Trader Joe's, coming up to try to hug you, and you're like, get off me. Especially like we were in public. You're like, ah!
And you'd like kiss on my cheek. You'd be like, like on my cheek. And I would feel suffocated.
Oh, totally.
I'd feel overwhelmed.
Like, oh!
Why is this happening? This isn't safe. And touch wasn't safe in relationship with my mom.
Yep.
There was a lot of the
there
touch.
was more painful touch than
there
nurture.
was nurturing touch. And so some people will be in relationship and they'll go, oh, I just don't receive love in those ways. That's just not me. No, actually it's meant to be you.
Yeah.
It's an avenue of humanity, of expressing a love through touch and care in those ways, to that type of nurturing experience that is real and true to humanity and part of our makeup. But if it hasn't been modeled, we don't know how to absorb it. And especially if it was modeled poorly, we especially can't absorb it. And so when it comes to the idea of moms, the concept of the roles of mothers and fathers is continually evolving in different ways. Historically, the concept is mother is the expression of nurture.
Nurture and connection.
And so especially if we don't have that historically with a mom, nurture and connection, that can be super detrimental for us.
Absolutely.
And our ability. And again, there was places where I didn't know how to give that, and I especially can't receive that. And that shuts down the capacity to experience love and connection in a massive way.
Absolutely. And I think like I don't know that you had words for that back then.
Not at all.
Like you were just like, too much, back off.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think you understood, like you didn't know you had an aversion to touch. You didn't know you had an aversion to comfort. You didn't, like, I remember for years.
I was never comforted, especially when I was sick.
Right.
Right. So if you were like, are you okay? Because I have a headache. I'm like, yeah, leave me alone.
Oh, totally. You were so annoyed. Every time I would do what I thought was care for you, you'd be so frustrated.
And I rejected it. And that was probably incredibly painful. And I want to say, I'm sure I've said it before in the past a bunch, but I am so sorry for all the places that you really tried to love me well and give of your heart towards me through physical touch and words of affirmation. And I shut it down so much. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I just actually had this wave of compassion as you were talking where I wanted to cry. I'm like, she tried so hard to love me. I was such a pain in the ass.
It was real abrasive.
That's so sad. Sad for her. It's sad for me.
It really is. Well, I was going to say like, I love physical touch, and I am one of those people that thinks physical touch is not a love language. I think it's something that every human actually needs in their life.
I think when they say love language, like I think that people take it as an option, but it's actually an expression of love to humanity that we, like you said, all need. Because
they say that you need 12 meaningful physical touches every day.
Non-sexual.
Yeah. In order to just healthily process life. Just have an emotional processing system, and the amount of endorphins that come from touch and all that stuff. And what happens is people don't realize that oftentimes their trauma or their fear or their pain is why touch feels like. I had a friend, and she didn't have trauma, but her dad had lots of anger issues. And so he just felt like, and it wasn't like crazy rage. It wasn't abusive, but it didn't feel like she could ever tell what was going to happen. And so she would never let him hug her or touch her or be affectionate with her because of that reason. So we all have these reasons. And my whole goal in I just wanted to mention that because physical touch is great. But with you, so I love physical touch. I love like rubbing my hand. I don't know how to say this not sexually.
Rubbing my shoulder, touching
rubbing
my back.
people's backs. Like I'm always like touching somebody.
Right.
And so, but I would say I didn't enjoy touching you until, that sounds funny. That sounds horrible. No. I love sex. But like just like soft touches on your back.
Affirming touch.
Yeah. I didn't
or nurturing
have
touch
probably until the last 2 years. And the last 2 years is when you like, are you laughing about this?
I'm totally laughing about it.
Well, the last 2 years is when you opened up to receive touch in a comforting way.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah, 2 to 3. But it's like, I could actually feel and like now it's going to be received. It's way more fun for me.
I've enjoyed comforting touch for last 8 years or 9 years, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
At some level where I'm like, oh, I like that she's scratching my back or she's touching my shoulder. But to really like lean into it where I'm like, oh, I'm absorbing this. I'm so in need of this. This actually really profoundly affects me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say that's that and words of affirmation, those kinds of things you didn't know how to handle.
I don't here's the point and part of what we're talking about here. I don't think I ever could have gotten to this place of receiving something so profound if I didn't acknowledge why I couldn't receive it in the first place and where it came from and how I didn't have nurture. Mm-hmm. And some of you guys, as we're talking here, as you're listening, need to start asking like, what was the nurturing roadmap?
Yeah.
When it came to, did I get nurture? How was that nurture expressed? And all of a sudden you may go, oh, I didn't get it in these ways. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not that I just don't like touch. Maybe it's that I don't know how to receive it because I didn't have an example of it.
That was safe.
What happens, even if it has nothing, let's say you grow up in a home, everyone's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Nobody yells, nobody screams, but nobody touches, nobody affirms.
Totally.
There is this idea that touch is weird because it just wasn't modeled.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be unsafe. It just doesn't feel normal.
Yeah.
And you have to begin to go, oh, actually, I'm going to rewrite the normal in my head as far as how I relate in this arena. My mom didn't know how to be nurturing in these ways, but I'm going to be open to changing that and absorbing it.
And the interesting thing is the nature versus nurture kind of question that everybody asks, because knowing you now, I think physical touch is one of your main love languages. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of them. I think the more you grow in love, the more you get good at receiving and giving all of them.
Yeah.
But I would say, when I met you, I don't know that it would have come across as one of your main love languages. And so, but that doesn't feel like that's because it wasn't intrinsically who you were. Yeah. It feels like that's because of what you experienced.
So definitely take some time to start thinking about that and asking those questions. Like, what is my nurture roadmap?
Yeah.
But let me go back here to you.
Okay, let's do it.
And how kind of like your mom affected
our marriage. Uh-huh. Well, yeah, I think this was a bigger pill to swallow. Cause like we said before, you grew up hearing your whole life, like how a boy treats his mom is how he'll treat his wife. Like, you know that connection exists, and like girls with their dads are affected. So I don't think I ever acknowledged that my relationship with my mom probably influenced our marriage so much.
Probably.
I mean, as I was coming out of my mouth, I was like, that's not the right word. Definitely influenced our relationship so much. But the thing about moms is they are a bonding pattern for us. We are learning how to bond. We are learning how to connect. And different families have different roles. Like you might have a stay-at-home dad, so you might learn more about bonding and connection from a stay-at-home dad. But typically the person that you're around more and whoever is more nurturing. And in every family that's different. It's not the woman or the man. But regardless, how you bond to your mom determines a lot of how you show up. So part of my problem in our marriage, part of the biggest problem is that I was in denial
What? No, Abby didn't have denial. Justin said, sarcastically denying her denial.
Yeah. I was in denial about my childhood. And so as long as I was in denial about my childhood, that meant I couldn't take ownership for my triggers. Mm-hmm. So there were all these places you were like smiling ear to ear. You're like, this is the best ever. I'm soaking it in.
It's so validating. No,
yes. Kidding. But
I already feel validated over this.
Yeah. But I mean, I think probably as long as I talk about it for the next few years, it'll feel good to your soul.
Totally.
But so because I denied that I had that there was events that deeply affected me, then if a trigger came up, I literally was like, no, it's not me, it's you.
Totally. Because I mean, how do I put it? The record that kept playing over and over again in regards to your mom was, no, my mom loved me so well. It was so great. It was so easy with her. Yeah, she got a little sick later on in life, but otherwise everything was so incredible with her.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, but it wasn't. There was craziness. And anytime I'd try and poke a little bit at that, it was like poking the bear. And you're like, no.
Oh, yeah, totally. And there was, I even denial in the fact that like in my head until probably a month ago, I was like, my mom was a great mom until I was around 7. And then she started going into depression and started getting sick. But I just found her health records that she'd typed for herself. And she was sick my whole life. Yeah. And she was depressed long before 7.
Yep.
And I mean, I think she was more active when I was younger, but it is just an interesting thing how denial can completely create a huge story in your mind. And so I believed like me and my mom had a very close relationship. It was emotionally incestuous. So we talk about that. There's a book called Emotional Incest Syndrome that I read. You really only have to read the first half of the book because you basically get the gist. But
which everyone does.
Yeah.
The first half of every book and you're done.
Totally. Most books are like that. That's true. I'm determined one day to write a book where the end is good. Anyway, so the idea was we were too close. I was her whole world. I was the only person who loved her well. I was, and I talked about this in the other episode, like I was unconditional love. I was the safest place she'd ever experienced.
Right.
And so there was no boundaries. We did everything together when I was younger, and she loved me in so many ways. She was so verbally affectionate and physically affectionate and gave me candy, and she taught me a lot about emotional eating.
And diabetes.
Yeah, no kidding. Every time I had a hard day, it was like, do you want a hot fudge sundae? Like, that might be fun once in a while, parents, but do not create a habit of that.
No.
But, so we were really close, and then she got sick and I became her caregiver. And I just think that's basically how I viewed it. Like, she was a great mom, and then slowly there was, she got sick, and then eventually I left. Like, that was kind of like the gist of what I believed. Yeah. And now looking back, I see so many things. When I look at my childhood, I'm like, oh my gosh, she was very narcissistic and very up and down and changed personalities multiple times. Not like she didn't have multiple personality disorder. I mean, like
extremisms.
She was one person, then she went into depression. She was another person. Then she was addicted on pain meds. She was another person. Then there was just some major. So, when I look back now, I am aware like, oh, I didn't get my needs met emotionally. I didn't feel safe or secure ever. I was so enmeshed with her that I couldn't handle her. Well, I mean, I could because she did, but so she was depressed all the time. So I was constantly wanting to fix that because I couldn't see where I ended and she began. Yeah. And so there was no like, I can let you be sad and I can be over here. It was, no, we are one person. So I need to dig us out of this mess.
How do you feel like that played a role in our marriage?
Well, so I remember in our first year of marriage, and this is where, just like you'd said about the blame. So when I married Justin, he didn't know emotional connection and intimacy as well as he does now. like there was just much less. He was alone in his bedroom a lot. And there was some relational bonding things he'd never learned. So I marry him and I'm drawn to that. I'm drawn to a narcissistic person that I think I can fix and then get them to love me. And then I will finally be okay.
Which, as a side note, I wasn't some massive narcissist.
No, did I say you were?
You said you're drawn to a narcissistic person that you could. I'm like,
you were. I'm sorry.
The problem is we were two codependent people trying to fix each other.
No, I've actually always said that we're both givers. You were never narcissistic. You just didn't know, you weren't as good at the bonding part.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you were always a giver. It was like, I was probably thinking of the next sentence before. So what I am around you and I think I'm going to fix you and that's going to help me finally, like, cause I tried to fix my mom my whole life. Every year was a new thing that I was going to try to, and it was everything from like, oh, try listening to this sermon or try reading this book or let me clean your house for you or try eating this way. Like I always wanting to get her to do that and never feeling. She never chose. She never chose to be powerful. So we get married and I don't realize like I have a wound that she couldn't meet my needs. She never met my needs. And so that is extreme. She met my needs sometimes.
Right.
On a regular overall general basis of my life, that is not something that happened very often. So,
how do you feel like that affected the way you related
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm getting there. So when we get married and you already are a little bit more internal, so it feels like you to me. I'm like, you're never going to meet my needs. You're never going to connect to me. You're never, and there was behaviors that you did that really felt so true to me about that. And so I'm looking at you. I was the whole first year of our marriage. I'm like, I don't know if you're ever going to bond. I don't know if you're ever. And really what it was is I would have maybe had a level 4 concern about that. Like, I hope he learns some relational bonding, but I have a level 9 fear about it in our marriage because I'm like, my needs are never going to get met. I'm never going to be seen. I'm never going to be taken care of. I'm never going to get what I need.
Which that unconscious feeling that you had expressed towards me
felt like your mom.
Felt exactly like my mom.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden
you're reacting to your mom. I'm reacting to my mom.
And we are spinning in a cycle, convinced that the other person
is the problem.
We're
chasing ghosts.
Exactly. And I 100% was like, this is my mom. How could this not be my mom? All the time she keeps pulling from me and acting like what I do is not enough.
Right. And I'm like, you are so shut down and guarded. And I don't know if you're ever going to bond to me.
Yep.
I remember when we got back from our road trip, like my first thought is you're going to go hang out with all the boys because we were staying with like 6 guys. And I was like, you're going to forget about being married to me. But the first thought is from my life of you're not going to take care of me. And over again that year, I remember getting in fights where we were at this place one day and I was really enjoying it. And you went to get lunch and so you ate a sandwich and then you called me and you're like, hey, I went and got lunch and I brought you the half of the sandwich that I had. And I literally am like, you dad, what?
Yeah. So she loses it on me.
Yeah. Cause I'm like, what? I'm an afterthought to you. You don't want to connect with me over lunch. You don't want to hang out with me. You gave me your leftover sandwich instead of thinking about me and what I would like to eat.
So the whole story simply went, I knew that she was busy doing what she was doing. And I was like, she's going to get hungry really soon. I need to find her some food. So I go and I find her a sandwich. I'm like, oh, I'll eat half now and I won't interrupt her. And so I didn't even go get the sandwich initially for me, but I was like, oh, I should probably eat or I'll crash too. So I'll take half and her half will be ready for her when she's done. Everything was initiated by me thinking about her. And now she's having this massive meltdown that I don't care about her, which now is going back to, see, you can't make a woman happy.
Totally.
You can think everything you want about them and try and care for them, and it just doesn't matter. They'll find a problem with it.
Totally. And I am sitting there and this is like, oh my gosh, if I would have understood that there was a lot of narcissistic like I was surrounded by narcissism in my childhood.
Right. So she's convinced that everyone around her does not care about her.
My needs will not
Never
get met.
Yep.
And so my first thought is Justin doesn't think about me.
Yep.
Justin doesn't care about me, because as my relationship transitioned, there was lots of ways with both my mom and dad that I felt like nobody is actually concerned about if I'm going to be okay. And so, that played out over and over and over again with you in, probably not seeing that your heart was really good towards me, not seeing that you were actually trying to love me really well, because it took me a few years before I could see that your intentions were to actually love me and take care of me.
Yep.
And it wasn't because your actions weren't showing it for those few years.
Right.
But my filter picked up a lot of evidence for all the ways that you weren't meeting my needs.
And I progressively became deeply hopeless inside of that cycle, because I'm like, because there were times where I'll be like, can't you see all the things that I'm doing? Right. Going back to what I even said earlier, but like literally I'm trying to show you and clarify, this is who I am. My heart's always for you. I'm thinking about you so often. And again, until you could really process the reality of your mom's stuff, it was just left in the realm of, it's my problem.
Yeah.
Justin's a problem here.
Totally.
Inside of this.
And then I think another thing that me and you both did towards each other is that oh my gosh, it just flew out of my brain. We did something because of our moms. Ooh. I can't remember. Okay. There was something that me and you both did in relationship to our moms, is both of us thought it was our job to make the other person happy. And so we didn't know how, either of us didn't know how to let the other person feel and have a space to actually be okay.
Yep.
And I had this deep fear of abandonment, and I didn't realize that was from my mom. Like I had this huge, and for years of our marriage, he would say, you have a huge fear of abandonment. You have a huge fear of abandonment.
Again, I would tell you, you're like, I'm not scared of abandonment.
But it would be like crazy. Like if you were leaving on a trip, I would blow up at you the day before you left.
You were always, you're trying to create connection through explosions too.
Yeah. Well, but you mean when the day before you left?
Yes.
Yeah. Or it's like, I'm pushing you away before you leave.
Right.
Yeah.
It's both. Like, here's a strong connection I'm trying to feel as you're leaving, and I'm also trying to push you away. And it was all this craziness. And I'm like, this is weird every time we come up to this moment. And to the point where I like knew it. I'm like, all right, well, here we go.
Totally.
There's going to be this explosion, which also reminded me of my mom.
Right.
Every time there was something like that, my mom created those types of cycles.
Well, and this is the crazy thing. So we have these triggers from our childhood, and then we're with people that does behaviors that maybe not the same frequency or maybe not the same way, but it feels the exact same.
Yep. And
then it's really hard to unhook that some of your emotions may not be about them, because you're like, no, clearly what they're doing is just like my mom. Of course my mom trigger is here. But so over and over for years, you'd say, you have an abandonment wound. You have an abandonment wound. And there's lots of fear that I had inside of that. And so you would actually end up feeling crazy, because I'd be like, there's nothing where I was abandoned. I was, and eventually I actually started to believe you, because you built a logical case.
Yeah. And we pummeled you inside of a counseling session. Yeah. Multiple times.
But I started to believe you, but still couldn't figure out why. I'm like, why would I have an abandonment issue?
Yeah. Why would I feel abandoned?
That doesn't make sense. And it wasn't until my denial popped and I we have to make sure we're telling a realistic story of what happened, and we can be unrealistic in either way. We can either make it worse than it was, we can make it more about ourselves than it was,
right,
or we can make it more positive than it was. So when I actually recognized like, oh, I felt abandoned because I had a mom and then I didn't.
Yes.
And she progressively left. Every year I had less of her is how I'd explain it. Every year I had less of her. Every year I was abandoned more. And so literally abandonment was like, and then I also think there's abandonment that you can get passed down trauma. Like, so my mom had abandonment trauma and we're emotionally enmeshed. So I think like I picked up a lot of her
feelings, made them your own. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And I think kids are never taught that they are feelers. And so they don't know that they could just be picking up on their parents' feelings, or also in our DNA, we can carry the trauma from past generations. But so now I look at it, I'm like, oh, my mom, I did feel abandoned all the time. Like literally every day I felt abandoned. I was experiencing constant grief and loss. And that played out with you all of the time.
Absolutely.
And the thing of like, and not being able to let each other have emotions.
I literally, as a side note, just to make a note on something you just previously said, I was talking to a friend of mine and they were processing some pain of their childhood and their emotions about where they grew up in their childhood. And they were like, I feel horrible that I grew up this way. And I feel so much shame and I never want anyone to know about it. And I'm like, that's not even a big deal. The way you grew up wasn't horrible. It's very normal. A lot of people grow up that way. And I was like, do you think this was actually your mom's feelings about it and her shame about your guys' living circumstances? And she was like, oh my God, I never thought that these could have been my mom's emotions the entire time. And then she started recalculating and she was like, that wasn't a bad situation to live in. That doesn't make me less of a person to grow up in that situation. I mean, I'd break it down, but I don't want to expose her. But, so yeah, I mean, it's so often we're feeling someone else inside of our environment. We're not even aware of it. And so that's an aspect that we have to look into.
Totally.
Even as, what were my mom's emotions about life? And were they actually, do I have similar emotions?
Yeah.
It's not just how did they act, but what did they believe to be true?
And did I pick that up?
Did I pick that up and decide that that was my burden to carry as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one thing also, I came away with aloneness with my mom.
Yeah.
She probably felt that. And I also felt that. And so I brought a lot of aloneness. So I constantly felt like in money, like I have to make money or else we're not going to have it.
Right.
Or I have to, so it was that I was the caregiver. So it was like this aloneness, like I have to be in charge. If I'm not on, I don't know if I can trust that you'll be on. And there's so many ways that you have never displayed behavior. You've never displayed behavior that you wouldn't partner with me.
Totally.
Financially, physically, emotionally. And yet for years, I felt alone and on guard and frustrated. And I was like, if I could get remarried, I would marry like some rich 50-year-old man. And really, because I wanted to not feel alone, but I didn't understand that feeling of aloneness would have showed up if I married a rich 50-year-old man. It would have showed up like, I don't have an emotional connection, or because it's about this insatiable hole that I had in my heart from my mom. And there was different parts, from my dad, but that I have to actually heal and nurture. And we're going to do a podcast about how to like heal and nurture. Like the first step is noticing and acknowledging how you've been affected and how that plays out in your relationships. And I can honestly say, I have taken out so much of my mom, my issues with my mom, my issues with bonding, my fear about bonding, me being overly I have been overly attached to you, where if somebody hurts you, I can't handle it.
Right.
Or the way my mom had huge emotions and I felt like I didn't have room to have emotions. I felt that way. So if you're having emotions, then I didn't feel like I had room to have emotions. And you never said that.
Totally.
That was never a rule you made. And so there's thing after thing after thing in my life where I recognize that I brought the story of, because my mom was the main person I bonded with.
Yep.
And so that story replicated in so many ways. And it took me, I would say, this year is when I'm understanding all of it. And we are emotionally intelligent, have seen people to get help, and we're 11 years in. So I just want to say, like, to all those people who are like, no, I know this is a real issue. This isn't about my parents, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, no, they're probably in there and you just haven't become aware of it.
And like we said, it's like, it's not that Abby didn't feel at times genuinely, like what you're describing was an insatiable, needy monster. At some points you were where you're convinced I didn't love you.
Yeah, because you're never going to meet my needs. It's the story of what I felt as a kid that I never put words to. Now I am just magnifying on you. But
when we look at that, as we wrap this up, as we look at that, we go, yeah, but she legitimately did. Yeah, she did have that problem there. But if I didn't have my mother wound and I was resolved and at peace with that, I would have had an easy capacity to say, oh, hey, it feels like you're always dissatisfied with me in that area. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy being me, and I'm going to be at peace over here and totally be chill on my end. And if you want to come join me over here, you're welcome to, but you're probably going to have to look at your mother wound stuff. And I would just kind of move on with life and be able to be happy when she was dissatisfied. But my world went into a spiral with the addition of my history with my mom. So again, if we can take responsibility and ownership for ourselves and our own story and remove the clutter that's actually weighing us down on our shoulders and get honest about that, then we can become a powerful person. That meaning that I, inside of my own soul, get to find my own peace, my own joy, my own happiness, irregardless of where Abby is. And Abby can be that same powerful person, irregardless of where Justin is at. And so even when we look at Abby's story right now, as she's wrapping her portion up of this, we can look at this and go, oh, if Abby could deal with her mom's stuff, all of a sudden Justin could have painful situations where people hurt him, or he could be in pain, and she just gets to go, oh, I'm sorry you're in pain.
Totally.
And she gets to pat him on the back, and she gets to go on at peace with her life.
Or like when you didn't know how to do nurturing connection,
right?
I could have been like, oh, this is really sad for you. I don't have to fix you. I can be kind to you in this process, and I don't have to take it personally.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't my trigger that my needs were never going to get met, I would have just been like, oh, you're in a learning journey about love.
Because even in that, Abby could have been able to say, hey, I can learn how to meet these needs.
Yeah.
She could have learned how to healthfully nurture herself, connect to herself, and also invite some healthy relationships to nurture and love on her as I'm going through my process.
Absolutely.
And as it's a dialogue on our plate, then it becomes a dialogue and not a need where she's like pulling from me. And then she could be so powerful even when I don't have capacity.
Yep.
So thank you all for joining us talking about this. Again, roadmap. What is your roadmap with your mothers? What is the story that was written? And then ask the question, how does that play a role in my life today? And as a side note, we've got our Living Fully Alive course that's launching.
Yes.
It's going to be launching in January, but pre-registration's coming up very soon.
Very soon. And we're so excited about this. This is pretty much teaching you how to recognize your triggers, how to self-nurture, how to walk through your emotions, how to get whole, how to take ownership, how to heal the pain. Like basically we bring up stuff on the podcast, but we give you the tools on how to walk through it in the LFA course. So if you want to know more about that, email us at lfa@stumballconsulting.com and let us know you want to get all the information as pre-registration opens up for that. It's also our first step if you want to become a life consultant. It's the first step we say is foundational for all of that process. All right. So thanks for joining us, and bye. Bye-bye.